Shinji Mikami is a veteran of the gaming industry with a career that stretches back over 20 years. One of the rising stars of Capcom's internal development studios, he got his start working on 16-bit Disney titles by the likes of Goof Troop and Aladdin. But before long, he took on the role of director on one of the most influential games ever made, the survival horror classic Resident Evil.
The first Shinji Mikami game I played was probably Resident Evil. I thought it was an interesting evolution of the adventure game genre, actually, because the combat in the game wasn't very precise. It was very tense, but it wasn't exactly like a button mashy kind of thing. You didn't want to be in combat. It was more about, collecting this crest from here and that crest from there and smushing them together and then putting them in this door to unlock that.
Resident Evil is like one of the few games where every time you'd unlock a new area, you didn't want to go there and you wanted to backtrack and find other stuff. Because you never want to go forward because forward is scary in Resident Evil.
So I played Resident Evil 1, but I think the game that actually stands out for me is actually Resident Evil 4, because it solved this issue of the camera and your body getting in the way of what you could see on the screen. You had this over-the-shoulder view with this really great control scheme that maybe seems a little quaint now, kind of like Resident Evil 1's control scheme in the sense that it didn't offer a whole lot of maneuverability, but that was kind of the point about Resident Evil 4, is that everything was very deliberate.
And he kept the basic elements of like, here's zombies and you have to survive. And he just made a completely different experience around it. And I think it's very rare when you see a designer change his own baby so drastically and take it in a completely new direction.
I mean, QuickTime events had been done, of course, but this was the first game that I remember where I had to pay really close attention to the cutscenes, not just because I wanted to know what was going on, and I did want to know what was going on, but also because it was a life or death matter to pay attention during a cutscene. Suddenly I remember that first moment where a boulder can come and crush you and you have to hit a button to get out of the way. You had to pay attention. That was a very telling moment in that game. That moment said, you don't get to sit back and take a breather.
While Mikami is best known for his contributions to the Resident Evil series, his resume of titles is about as varied and far-reaching as one can imagine. He has lent his talents to 2D action brawlers like Beautiful Joe, puzzle adventure games like Phoenix Wright, and completely unique and original titles like Piano 3. In an industry which has a habit of rewarding iterative sequels and continuing franchises, looking at his body of work begs the question, what exactly are the telltale traits of a game made by Shinji Mikami?
There's not one specific trait that I can point to and say every Shinji Mikami game has this, which is really, it's kind of wonderful because he's done games that are good in just about every way a game can be good.
The greatest thing about Shinji Mikami is that you don't necessarily know what's coming next. And that's true of his work across studios, whether he was in the role of a producer, whether he was in the role of a director. You just don't know what that game is going to be like, because from one project to the next, everything seems so original and fresh and interesting.
He's not just making the same game over and over and over again. He's stepping outside of his comfort zone. He's exploring mechanics in different ways and in deeper ways when he has to do sequels.
And you have to look at that and see, and say, what are all the things that these games have in common? And obviously they have some commonalities, but what they have mostly in common is you didn't see it coming. And the reason you didn't see it coming is because it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with the games that came before, and I think that's important.
From Goof Troop to Vanquish, Phoenix Wright to Shadows of the Damned, it seemed the only thing that's predictable about the games of Shinji Mikami is his utter lack of predictability. His knack to take familiar formulas and weave the gameplay in such a manner as to turn the entire game on its head are what have made his titles so influential on the industry as a whole. But for a game director with as many tricks up his sleeve as Mikami has shown, it becomes encouraging to speculate as to what he'll be working on in the future.
What I hope next comes from Shinji Mikami is something that I don't know is coming from Shinji Mikami. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I guess, when I say it that way. But what I mean is, what I want next is something that I couldn't have predicted, because that's what he does. That's what he's best at. I want to see something that comes out of left field, something that I didn't know I want, and yet something that once I have it, I don't know how I did without it.
That's, that should be inspiring for game developers, to show that you can innovate and still execute on new ideas as good as you did on the, iterative ideas from before. So I guess there's like a selfish streak of me that wants a new God Hand, that wants a God Hand with production values. Because that game was phenomenal. It was just so incredibly interesting, the way that it encouraged you to customize your character around this fighting engine.
I want him to just have free reign, because he's been like the lead creative guy in like 6 or 7 games now, and I think all of them have been a success to various degrees. I mean, the obvious ones are stuff like Resident Evil 4 and Vanquish, which are just, when they came out, there's just a lot of critical praise. But then there's games like Piano 3, which was a GameCube exclusive, and it tapped into the same thing as Rez did, where it combined music and rhythm with shooting action, and it had this style, this infectious feeling that was so unique at the time, and it just shows that even like these little pet projects he has are still there's something there, and they're totally worth playing. So I want him to have free reign in the future, because I know that whatever he does is going to be awesome.